Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 150. We made it to 150, you guys. Thanks for being here today. My name is Matt Ersman, and as always, so glad to have you with me for a really great conversation today. So today we are joined by two familiar voices on the pod, friends of mine, Pastor Andy Owen, Pastor Kyle Goings, both on staff at Ridgepoint, where I'm also on staff here in Wichita. And today we're talking about one of USMB's core commitments, all about leadership development. So Andy and Kyle will be some of our speakers at the gathering event coming up here in July in Salt Lake City. They're going to be talking about leadership development, so today's conversation is just kind of priming the pump a little bit as we get ready for that. And really, the main gist of what we talk about today and what I think they're going to hit in July is that, why is leadership development so hard? I think very few of us feel like we're doing a good job at it, so why is that such a difficult thing for so many churches? Today we look at some data about what some current trends are in church leadership, and I think you'll go away with some practical things that you can try in your church as well. So let's take a quick break to hear from this week's sponsors, and then we'll get to my friends, Pastor Andy Owen and Pastor Kyle Goings.
Great news for the Central Valley and beyond. Fresno Pacific University has received a transformational $10 million Lilly Endowment Grant to equip and support today's church leaders, especially co-vocational pastors serving our communities. This investment expands seminary training, launches new programs, and provides vital scholarships for ministry students. And when you give toward the Lilly Matching Grant, your gift is matched, doubling your impact. Join us in strengthening the future of the church. Give today at fpu.edu/seminary.
All right, friends. Well, today I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast two of my actual real life friends that I see almost every day. And they are both very gifted ministry leaders, and they're also going to be speaking at convention. And I try to avoid this being like a Ridgepoint show, but hey, it's hard to avoid today. We've got three Ridgepoint folks, so sorry about that for everybody listening. But today we're joined by Pastor Andy Owen and Pastor Kyle Goings. Both of you are just, lead pods. The fans just demanded you come back. You've been on multiple times. This is just one for the people because they just needed more Andy and Kyle. So we're here for the fans. Absolutely. Exactly. They're just clamoring. They demanded more of you. So welcome back. Glad to have you guys with us.
It's an honor, man. Again, huge fan of the podcast. Love what you do. This is like the side gig that it's just like the best kept secret. Love what you're doing, and it's fun to be a part of it.
Yeah. Now you're appearing on my YouTube shorts. So good job, Matt. There you go. That's the sign of really making it, is when I can hack Kyle's algorithm. Yes. Awesome. Well, again, a lot of people know you guys, but let's just do a quick introduction if people aren't super familiar with you guys. So, Andy, you've been in MB world for a long, long time. Can you just give us a quick reminder of your background, your bio, and what you do at Ridgepoint?
Yeah. Well, I'm a Gentile Mennonite, as I like to say, because I grew up in a Nazarene church and then landed at Tabor College. I got connected with the Mennonite Brethren world through that, and then met my wife, who is more of the has more of the Mennonite Brethren roots, I guess you could say. But so I went to the seminary in Fresno as well, and then my wife Carmen and I got married. Spent 20 years overseas in Thailand doing mission work, and now about 5 years back here in Wichita serving with Ridgepoint Church. So yeah, it's been a fun journey and fun to stay connected with the Mennonite Brethren family over many, many years.
We'll dive into a little bit more of your background, Andy, because I've got some specific things I think will be helpful to our conversation today. But Kyle, you also, I feel like you're also everywhere in MB land. So people probably know you, but if they don't, give us a recap of who's Kyle Goings.
Grew up in the Midwest, went to Judson College, it's now university. That's where I met my wife, Katie. And so I grew up Baptist, so I guess I'm a Gentile MB as well. For me, I've not been Mennonite Brethren unless they paid me. Okay, so I started in Rapid City, South Dakota, at an MB church over there many years ago. And for the past 12, been the Next Gen pastor at Ridgepoint Church here in Wichita. I also oversee USMB Next Gen, so I have a pretty good team that does a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and then I'm the director of that. So that's kind of my side gig as well.
Very cool. Well, like I said, I get to see you guys every day, and you're both very gifted leaders of your ministries, and we're honored to have you with us today. So, okay, so while we have you today, of course, other than just the fans demanding you back, is that you guys are both speaking at convention this July. And so we're kind of walking through this series where we're talking to all the speakers who will be presenting. And you guys are kind of doing something unique where I think you're kind of doing a tag team approach to your session. So, and I keep telling people too, we're recording this early February. I know the convention is not till July. I don't expect you guys to have your outline 100% finished yet, but I know you at least have an idea of what you're hoping to talk about. So first of all, what are you kind of generally hoping to talk about when you take the stage for convention?
Yeah, I know one of the 3 core commitments of the Mennonite Brethren is leadership development. And so that's what they've asked us to kind of speak on. And it was great. Kyle and I have gotten together to think through this and dream about it, pray through it. And one of the things that we wanted to tackle was, why is it so hard? Like, leadership development is something that we all feel like we should be about. I don't think there's anyone who would say, yeah, that's a bad idea. I don't want to develop any leaders. But it's just so hard for so many of us. And we're not alone. As I interact and network with churches in lots of other different denominations, it's an issue for the church all around the country. And even like secular business organizations are having trouble like finding and developing leaders. So it's almost like a cultural issue. So we want to get at maybe what are some of the core challenges and obstacles that we're facing? Because again, it's not a theoretical intellectual problem to say to convince people you should do this. It's more of a, okay, what's keeping us from this? And so we want to talk about that. We also have looked at sending out a survey, which we hope to send out, which will ask a few questions so that we actually have some data to show, here are some of the biggest obstacles we're facing and reasons why this is such a challenge for us, so we can address that together. But we're going to tag team on that. And Kyle, if you can speak to your part in that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. Andy and I overlap in our ministries and work because of leadership development. We both focus that on different areas. So I'm pretty excited. It's really nice to kind of not put all the pressure on yourself, or have all the pressure on yourself, I should say, for a speaker. So I'll give all the tough parts to Andy, and then I can do all the fun parts. That's kind of my plan. But no, it's one of those situations where, in my experience working with MB churches, no one disagrees, should we do more leadership development? But where the disagreement or the gap comes from is how. Like, okay, what's my next steps? Or what I'm noticing a trend is, yes, we are. They're in Sunday school. Or yes, they are. I teach leadership development from the stage every Sunday morning, my sermon. And so there's a disconnect on what actually is leadership development, what is discipleship, and all of that mixed together. So that's what we would like to tackle, is what actually it is and what are we doing as MB churches.
Yeah, very cool. Well, obviously dive into that. I don't want to go too far off topic here, but Andy, I'm just curious, after 20 years in Thailand, like you just mentioned that, American businesses, you hear about this in like American education, just this leadership shortage. Is this also a worldwide thing, or do you feel like it's a kind of an American thing? When you were in Thailand, are they having kind of similar conversations other places?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it because I'm in the American context now, but yeah, for sure. In our time in Thailand, every culture has its unique obstacles though. For Thailand, the unique obstacle was that unless you had a degree and well, maybe it's not unique, but unless you had like a degree and a title, it was tough to see that person have any authority in terms of leadership in a church setting. And so that's an obstacle in terms of the multiplication and growth. Like, how do you equip all the saints and not kind of have that priesthood of all believers idea in a culture that very much is a culture of honor and expects people to have a title and, some training, which we do too. We want people to have training, but that was the biggest obstacle there. And we face that some here, but yeah, all over the world, I think this challenge of 2 Timothy 2:2 to take these truths and empower it to others who can teach others has its unique challenges and opportunities in every culture.
And Kyle, I know I've heard, obviously, just because we're friends and we're together, and I've heard you speak several times. I know you're a data guy, you're a research guy, you've got a stat and a quote for everything. So, but can you kind of come back this up a little bit? Because again, I know you've done all the research and all the stats. What like the aging demographic of pastors, or the leadership cliff we keep hearing about? Can you kind of give us some of that background on some of those things?
my passion is Gen Z, which is age 14 through 28. So everyone thinks Gen Z's teenagers. Yes, they are, but now they're moving into the workforce. They're becoming the church planters and the associate pastors now. So if Gen Z's 14 to 28, all the research that I'm kind of seeing over the past 5 years since post-COVID is not really a good sign when it comes to church development. So I've shared this statistic before, but it kind of bears repeating. There are more Protestant ministry leaders over the age of 65 than under the age of 40 right now. So this is from Barna. And basically what that means is 50% of all pastors in the Protestant denominations are over the age of 55. And only 24% in 1992 were over the age of 55. So in 1992, only 24% were over 55. So there's a lot of new, particularly Gen X pastors coming out, church planters, but it has not kept up the momentum. So right now we're going to have a huge, what's called leadership gap or retention crisis, where there's not enough up and coming pastors to even replace the soon to be retired pastors. 1 in 4 pastors are going to retire by the age of 2030 or by the year 2030. So what that means is there's a problem as like, okay, where are these new young leaders? So I thought, oh, it's a retention problem. They come to church or they go to a college or they sign up to be an intern at a church and they become a pastor and they just don't like it. It's not good money. The people are complaining. You have a million bosses, whatever the reason, and they leave. But what statistics are now showing post-COVID is less than 5% leave the ministry outside of retirement or death. So what I would conclude when it comes to Gen Z and leadership development, one of the first conclusions is our bottleneck is entry, not retention. So we're just not having enough people being called into the ministry, being developed as leaders early in their life than we are. A bunch of pastors are leaving. So that's going to get harder as the years go down, or as the years go by. There's going to just not be enough pastors to even replace the current ones, let alone church planters. So that's a statistic like, okay, we need to disproportionately invest in this age group, particularly younger age group, in order to break that curve or the trend that's coming.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm curious, there's probably not one answer to this, but if there's this kind of pending cliff where so much has changed from like the 90s till the 2020 era, and again, this isn't just a church problem. We see this everywhere. Like just for examples, like our presidents are getting older, the Congress is getting older, every CEO is basically a boomer. So like anywhere you look in culture, it's mostly older people who are leaders. And so I guess that's always true to some extent, but it seems like it's more true now than it has historically been. And there's kind of these stereotypes about millennials and Gen Z that were lazy or whatever, but I don't think that's it. So why do you think we're seeing this like specifically now? Do either you have any input on that?
I think it's Gen X's fault.
Oh yeah, we forgot about Gen X.
Oh yeah, I forgot about them. Andy, remind us who Gen X is.
See, we just didn't show up. We just completely abdicated all leadership, and now we are where we are. We just said, "Oh, we'll let our parents take care of that." Yeah, no, I don't know. I think it is an issue culture wide, but I just gotta say, I am so excited for what God is doing in Gen Z, like, which again, to define it, what is it? What is the age category again, Kyle?
Age 14 through 28.
Yeah, so for age 14 through 28, I mean, I think we're seeing both statistics and also just a ton of anecdotal evidence of how God is moving amongst that generation. And it's encouraging. I mean, it's encouraging when I think about what God is doing to stir hearts in that generation and what that can mean for leadership development if we're willing to partner with God in that and maybe release some control and really focus on how we can develop that next generation. So I don't know, Kyle, you can speak to some of the statistics of it, and maybe some of our listeners have heard some of these statistics that have just come up in the last couple of years, but maybe you can speak to that, Kyle. What are some of the statistics saying about Gen Z?
So there's good things and bad things with Gen Z. So Matt, you kind of asked about like what some of the problems. It's a complicated issue with this. One of the issues is the older generation's perspectives. Millennials have kind of got a bad rap, and they're the ones who started this narrative that I'm going to live in my mom's basement till I'm 35 and never get a job. And some of that is true, not all of it is true. And so they just piled on that reputation with Gen Z. But Gen Z is a vastly different generation than millennials. And so there's some perspective change that needs to happen. And so when you have baby boomers, CEOs and leadership and climbing up the corporate ladder, and millennials and Gen Z doesn't desire that. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be their own boss in a small little company and not really have to deal with all the red tape or the huge multi-billion-dollar companies. Like that's no longer a desire for that. So they're not going to be filling in the shoes that baby boomers have. Now I'm generally speaking, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's some negative aspects, but some positive ones. So this just came out from Lifeway and Barna. Gen Z attends more church services than all the other generations. Now, it's 1.9 times a month. So that's still not 4 times a month. That's still less than half, but it's the most compared to millennials 1.8 and the other generations are less than that. So there's a whole bunch of statistics with that, mobility, all of that. But that's a sign that a generation now, for the first time since they started studying generations, increases in spiritual involvement. So it's been a trend since the silent generation. It's gone down each generation, faith, involvement, beliefs. And there are some real struggles with Gen Z. It doesn't mean like, oh, that everyone is a Christian and now your churches are full with Gen Z. It's generally speaking, and usually it's the bigger mega churches that are attracting Gen Z, and the rural, smaller churches are struggling. Not always, but the general speaking. And this really started this trend post-COVID. Now, we can easily get into politics, and we're not going to try to get into politics with this. But what the research generally shows is that Gen Z, who were teenagers and in school for most of it, really had a bad time trusting authority figures and politics and, the so-called experts of here's what you should do or here's what you not should do. And they realized something's missing, and I'm removed from my world and just placed in a digital world. And that's great. But unfortunately, it's not meeting what I need as a human. And so they're starting to rebel. It's like, yes, I'm dependent on technology, but there's got to be something more. And so instead of looking to the world, they look to the heavens. And they had this newfound hunger for God post-COVID that we have not seen since the early 70s in the Jesus Revolution movement. And so there's this desire like, okay, I want to be more open and understanding of this spiritual life. Now, here's the downside. They're called the open generation because they're more open to spirituality, but they're also more open to all other religions. So they're more open to the Mormon religion or Muslim or New Age. And so Christianity is just one of the options. And I really think it puts the responsibility on the church to say, okay, we need to speak up a little bit more in this generation because now we're just one of the many. It's not like, do you believe in God or don't believe in God? It's what God do you believe in? That's kind of some of the questions. So it's affecting culture as well. So I don't know if you listen to a lot of music, but for the first time in Billboard's Hot 100 in late 2025, there was 4 blatantly Christian songs, either by Christian artists or the artists saying Christian lyrics in the Billboard Top 100. Never in the history of that. So dare I say Jesus is kind of cool in our culture and therefore more open to talk about it. We have sports figures who have talked about their faith in Jesus. The Ohio State football team a couple years ago baptized 50 people on their team, coaches and players, and gave away 1,000 Bibles on campus. Now, it didn't hurt that they won the national championship that same year. But there's that connection. Like, I can speak about my faith more openly. In fact, it's encouraged, which is a good thing. That's not necessarily bad. The downside is it an actual revival or is it just a trend? We don't know yet.
I saw just something on, I think it was on Instagram just earlier today, which could talk about millennials and Gen Z. It was a comical post. It was like, if you're a millennial, you lived through Y2K, 9/11, the housing crisis, COVID, George Floyd, so it listed like all these just monumental things that millennials have lived through. And it said, can we just give me some silence in the podcast and leave me alone? Yeah. That's kind of like the millennial thing. And Gen Z has been around and alive for a lot of that, but not all of it.
Right.
So again, these are all generalizations. We don't want to go too far, but I do kind of wonder if the fresh life that we're seeing with Gen Z and maybe not so much from millennials is just that the millennial generation, there was just so much that happened in their kind of rise to adulthood that maybe they are just a little bit more cynical, a little bit more hesitant to take on leadership, a little bit more afraid of the world. I don't know, but Gen Z they've experienced a lot of hard things, but maybe not they're quite so burned by it. I don't know. I'm kind of just theorizing on the spot.
Oh,
Is that true, do you think?
That's fascinating, Matt, because I think your conclusion is very close to similar to my conclusion. So the millennials had Columbine and 9/11, all these terrible things. But the problem is that millennials were raised by baby boomers who really focused on if you change the internal belief, then the external, the world will be positive. And that's how they raised their kids. And so they also struggle with, my kid is going to get a trophy, whether they win or not, because I want them to feel good about themselves. So what millennial parents actually did was raise up their belief and expectations on the world without matching what the world offers. And so they go into college and you can be anything you want. You can choose any degree you want. It doesn't matter as long as you get an education. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened. And now they have thousands of dollars worth of college debt and their jobs and their degree does not match up. So they became cynical because we as parents raised up the millennials and say, this is good. You can do anything you want. You can make an impact. And then we didn't help them. And they're kind of an unlucky generation. And so that's where they became more cynical. It's like, well, fine, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to give up. I'm not going to strive for that because that doesn't work. And Gen Z saw that and realized, ooh, we need to be a little bit more practical and lower our expectations. And so Gen Z has lowered their expectations on what life would be like in the future.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Well, I think, I'm so legitimately excited about what God's doing in that generation. I mean, that book that came out that became a bestseller, The Anxious Generation, I think Jonathan Haidt wrote that. That has been such a pivotal book for a lot of leaders and school districts and others to like, how do we help this generation that has just wrestled with technology and anxiety and all the things. And I don't know, just again, both statistically, anecdotally, there was a young man who came to our church plant, South Life Church, just kind of randomly and didn't have a church background, just showed up at church and they said, well, what are you doing here? Like, what? Not like that. They're like, what brought you here? And he literally said to our church planter, where else am I going to go? Like, what else am I going to put my hope in? We have nowhere else to go for people in my generation, he said. And he said this, he said, there's not a single guy in my friend group who is not pursuing who God is.
Yep.
I just thought, man, what an opportunity. It happened here at Ridgepoint a couple of weeks ago. A young man showed up that had been a self-described atheist for 10 years. And he just said, God just got a hold of my heart. It felt like it was in a vice grip. And I had to come and seek him. And so God is turning this anxious generation into a revival generation. And I think for us as church leaders, we need to keep in step with the Spirit on this and figure out in our leadership development actual practices and pipelines, how can we tap into this hunger in a way that helps them to see that, there's more for them. There's a purpose for their life. He's got a calling for them. And I think we don't have to shy away then of teaching the gospel and teaching, Christian leadership principles and inviting them to step into ministry opportunities because we're finding people are open to that as well. So, I just think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I agree. And Carl, I'd like your take on this because I've heard some people say that, previous generations, you had to really work hard to convince them that God was real. Like that, maybe Gen X, maybe early millennials, that was kind of the big thing with apologetics was like, prove it. And I've heard people say that now, maybe younger millennials and Gen Z, I've heard people describe it this way. You don't have to look very hard to prove that evil is real. Young people today know that evil is real and they're drowned out by bad news. And they're, just like you said, Andy, they're desperate for hope. Everyone's looking for something to kind of take them out of the muck that I think we all kind of feel that we're in. So Kyle, I think you might have some stories or stats about that, right? Yeah.
I even have some statistics too.
Great.
And so for me, here's what I've noticed. I've been doing youth ministry that's direct involvement with teenagers for over 20 years, and it's a vastly different ministry, and it's a vastly different group than it was in the early 2000s, even late 90s. So many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, teenagers would be asking, how do I know the Bible's true? How do I know if God exists? So there's this disbelief that was naturally prevalent. But they're not asking those questions anymore. There's assumption, look, something's not adding up in this world, so there's got to be a being bigger and stronger than me and more powerful than me. So they're not asking, is the Bible true, or how do I know if God exists? They're asking, like, why is there still evil in the world? Like, something's disconnecting. Like, why is bad stuff still happening if God is all loving and all powerful? And there's these basic questions like, what does God want from me? So the assumption that I need to convince many of them that God is real, in my experience, that's becoming less and less needed. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't need it, but there's some deeper questions, and I call it this like second level discipleship. Like, after this basic knowledge, convincing that God exists, like, how do we move into, okay, you can have a personal relationship with God? And a lot of youth ministries, in my experience, and that's not necessarily Mennonite Brethren, but just denomination wise, when I talk to other denominational leaders, they're struggling. They're like, yeah, this Bible study and going through the book of Jonah is just not working anymore. They're asking these tough questions that are complicated, and they don't have direct answers. And I have to leave them with some questions of my own, and it's struggling. But that's kind of what they're wanting. They're not looking for the absolutes anymore, which is a good thing. They're desiring it. I like what Carey Nieuwhof says. He says Gen Z is in revival and retreat at the same time. And I see that on a local level, and I see that on a national level. Gen Z has this huge desire for growing in their faith, for a hunger for God, a hunger for worship, and a hunger for the Holy Spirit and be used by the Holy Spirit. But right now, I also see them struggling with taking the time to learn about how to interpret Bible verses, how to read the Bible, and not just, okay, read it like a self-help book, but actually digest the word. So I don't know if this is a revival or just some emotional experience, or a trend. So right now, I think the church can bend or lead this in a unique way, but I think we're still at a crossroads, and we haven't chosen yet.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I want to get a couple questions to you, because I know a lot of the people who are listening are probably on the leader side of things more than the younger kind of rising generation side of things. So I wonder if part of the reason why pastors are aging and they're kind of reluctant to pass the baton, like, honestly, it probably is a control thing. Like, they don't want to let go of their position or their influence, or they're not ready to pass on, or they see the leaders who are coming up behind them, and maybe they feel like, well, this guy's got promise, but he's not ready yet. I know, Andy, you're really big on giving people positions and authority and experience, maybe even before they're ready. And I think I'm probably an example of that. You've challenged me to do things that I'm not sure I was ready for, but you told me it was time for me to do it. Can you just talk about that? Because I see that value in you, and I wonder if that's part of why we're in the position that we're in, that some people just aren't ready to let go. Do you see that?
For sure. I mean, I saw a stat recently too that people that are 50 and up are just distrustful of the younger generations, that they're just like, I don't know if they really have what it takes, and so there's that. I think too, I hadn't thought about this until, well, really just now, honestly, but as our lifespan, I don't know, I haven't seen any research on this, but as our lifespan gets older and we stay healthier longer, it's possible to keep working longer. And the retirement age, for me at least, has been pushed out to 67. And so it's like, okay, I got and so in some ways we're working longer because we're healthier. But for me, I guess I can speak for me. When I turned 50, the day I turned 50 was something really interesting happened to me. It felt like a big milestone, but I felt good. I felt healthy. But I went for a run on the day I turned 50, and I was listening to just a random podcast. This sermon ended up being, the text was on Numbers chapter 8, which I'd never heard before. I'd read it probably before, but had never really thought about it. And this kind of obscure passage in Numbers 8 where the Lord gives Moses instruction on what to do with the Levites. And he said he had specific instructions for what the Levites do when they turn 50. And I was like, what in the world? I'm 50 today, and this is like the instruction. And it's in, Numbers 8, I think it's 23 to 26. It says that when you turn 50, the Levites' role is to shift from doing the tent, like setting up the tent, to ministering to those younger. So from 25, that's when they're supposed to start helping with the tent, like preparation and all these things. And when you turn 50, you stop doing the doing of the labor and you're ministering to them, it says, and you're guarding. And that was just such a great, I was already thinking, and I wanted to be an equipping kind of presence in my ministry anyways, but it really set the tone for me in my ministry to say, I need to move from doing to equipping. And that needs to be my win. Like, I need to be thinking about not just how many people I'm leading, but how many leaders I'm developing. And that became a real mindset shift for me. And I think it's an opportunity for the church and all of us who are in that category to think through not just how many people am I leading, but how many leaders am I developing? So,
Yeah. That's good.
Hey,
All right.
Andy, you should be a speaker. Like that was really good, Andy. Yeah.
Have you ever considered being a preacher, Andy?
Let's do it together.
Or maybe a missionary? Maybe you should.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, okay, our time's gone really fast here. I'm looking forward to hearing you guys speak at convention. I'm sure you'll have great stuff to share. I'm looking forward to that. Today, as we kind of start to wrap up, I always try to have something kind of practical. So we've been kind of theoretical so far. So other than what you just said, Andy, of being on the lookout for equipping the younger generations, any other things that you want our USMB leaders to start thinking about or action steps to take? Or, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Kyle, I know like the leadership pipeline, the interns and residents and mentors, I know that's really big into your heart. What do you want people to take away from this?
Yeah, I think Andy kind of set it up nicely is you get to a certain age and it doesn't mean your ministry stops, but it does need to change. And you start needing looking backwards and says, okay, I climbed up this mountain and it was really hard and sometimes I did it without myself, or I did it by myself. Now I need to kind of go back and help someone else climb up this mountain. So I think our churches need to change their focus and not realize that a leader is mid-20s, a college degree, and ready to go. We need to think that leaders need to go much younger. So if you're going to start recruiting or calling out the called, if you will, or calling someone into ministry, you got to go younger. And leaders especially lead pastors, need to get them involved in high school ministry and connect with high school students and call them out then versus waiting till they go to college and they get a degree, because people are not going to college for ministry degrees as they used to. The numbers are drastically lower. That means you need to go younger. It doesn't mean less people are actually being called to ministry. It just means the church has downplayed or not as focused as strongly as they needed to in calling out the called is, hey, I see in you. I wouldn't be into this position today if my youth pastor didn't instill in me, hey, I see something different in you and I want to cultivate that. And that's really what I think the most practical step is. Do you even know your high schoolers in your church? If you're so far removed from even basic names, then take your youth pastor, youth worker out to lunch and say, hey, is there a way I can do a message on a Sunday or Wednesday night first? Or do you know of anyone who has ministry potential? I would love to offer them, hey, could we meet once a week or once a month even and just have lunch and you can pick my brain. I can learn about you. You can learn about me. Like, there needs to be a much more interactive element between the lead pastor and a high school student. So that's one of my practical applications, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is like the leadership pipeline, which is USMB's leadership pipeline. We're always trying to help out and come alongside churches in any way. So we do training for internships. So we offer free training internships, resources galore for the interns and for the churches. We have a free packet on how to find an intern, how to hire an intern, how to lead an intern, how to evaluate an intern, all of that. It's all available on our website, leaderpipeline.net. But the big thing is, I think interns can be a very easy, practical, and impactful way to help people confirm their call, or at least give them ministry experience to see, oh, maybe that's something I do want to do. Even if it doesn't necessarily lead to a career, it could lead to a leadership opportunity. So maybe they become a math teacher, but they are your main youth worker at a church. That's something that I think we don't realize, that internships, how beneficial it could be. And I would say every single church can and should have an intern every summer. That's my big soapbox. And there's very few reasons that convinces me why a church shouldn't. And I would love to help that church or any church to do just that. So I'm getting off my soapbox. Andy, you go.
That's great. Well, Andy, before we go too far, I'll get to Andy in just a second. But
Okay,
I was reminded of something you said earlier, where we're having this kind of interesting, weird moment where I think you said that Jesus is kind of cool right now, and we've got Forrest Frank, we've got all these guys, and never in my life would I imagine that there would be not one but two Mercy Me biopics in theaters.
Yes.
Like, what in the world?
About a Christian band, and makes millions of dollars.
Yes, it's crazy. So I think we could take this too far and twist it and take advantage of it in a way that wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay.
But this interesting moment that we're in, Kyle, are more students interested in church internships now than they maybe were a few years ago? Or how can we kind of capitalize on this moment without taking it too far? Does that make sense?
Great example. That's a great question. Here's interesting. I think there's a ton of teenagers and young adults in their 20s that would love to work at a church for a summer or to intern. They just are waiting to be asked. So it doesn't mean we have this huge thousands of interns filling our banks and we don't have enough positions for them. This generation wants to be asked because they want that personal invite versus a stage announcement. And that puts more pressure on us. But I think we would get more interns if people just simply directly ask, hey, what are you doing this summer? We'd love to try that. Or even a part-time residency during the school year. So yes, I would say they're interested, but the normal promotional techniques is not going to work on the Gen Z because of various reasons.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's helpful. Okay, Andy, I kind of cut you off there. What would you add on just the practical takeaways for today?
Oh, no, I think that's well said. We'll talk more about that at the convention, I'm sure. But as we look at what are the felt needs in terms of the biggest obstacles, I certainly wouldn't want to skip over the Luke 10:2 principle. Like, you got to pray and ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers and develop leaders. So pray, and then keep your eyes open intentionally. I don't know. I created this spreadsheet with a list of 50 guys that I just track and just am like, okay, how are these guys doing? And I have touch points with them, and how are they growing in their development and leadership? And so just be intentional with some kind of system.
Yeah.
I think as leaders, we have our primary responsibility is to set the culture in our organizations, and that culture needs to celebrate and be intentional around how we equipping the next generation. And so we'll talk more about practical ways when we get together, but don't let just the whirlwind of life and ministry keep you from that very important task. So that's just an encouragement.
Yeah. That's good, because I think, again, I know the two of you pretty well. The three of us have a lot on our plates. Like, the three of us have no trouble filling way more than 40 hours a week, right? And so honestly, I think part of this is that there's so much expectation on church leaders now that it's just maybe a little bit harder than it maybe used to be to look to the future and then develop leaders. And that's for the three of us who work at a large church. And my heart goes out to people who are there. There's a pastor who's the only person on staff, and they're asked to do 80 million things a week. So I understand how keeping up one more spreadsheet sounds like it might be a task that they just don't have the margin for. But man, like, it's just so important. Like, if we want our churches to last, we've got to be looking out for future leaders. So anyway, I think you guys are both doing a really good job at that. Thank you for not only your leadership at Ridgepoint, but in USMB, and we're excited to hear more at that convention.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw one more thing in there.
Yeah.
I think I have this list and I mentioned there's 50 guys. It's actually not And I think it's important to just mention this too. This is not just, even though we're seeing a lot of statistics about young men, this is men and women that we're intentionally developing and looking to find ways that they're uniquely gifted to serve and are called. And so it's certainly something we need to make sure we're keeping that perspective, that how are men and women both uniquely and individually gifted to grow in their leadership capacity. So I want to keep looking at that too.
Yeah. Thank you for adding that, Andy. That's important. All right, guys. Well, again, thanks for your time today. Can't wait to hear you guys speak in July. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Get ready for a dynamic speaker lineup at USMB Gathering 2026. This July in Salt Lake City, you'll hear from A.J. Swoboda, author and theology professor, Aaron Box, USMB National Director, John Annan, pastor of Stony Brook Church, Aaron Halverson, pastor of Community Bible Church, Kyle Goings, Next Gen pastor at Ridgepoint Church, and Andy Owen, Ridgepoint's equipping and multiplication pastor. These leaders will challenge, encourage, and equip us as we explore our theme, Cultivate Living on Mission with Jesus. Learn more or register at usmb.org/gathering 2026.
But one more time, Kyle, Andy, thank you guys for a great conversation. Lots of good information there for us to all think about for our local churches. And hey, if you like that, you should definitely sign up to join us for the gathering this summer in Salt Lake City. And hey, even if you didn't like this, you should still sign up. It's going to be great. If you haven't yet, I encourage you to head over to usmb.org. There's a link right there on the homepage where you can get much more information. You can reserve your spot right there for the actual convention. And then there's also important details there about hotel and flights and all that kind of stuff. So July is going to be here before you know it. So if you don't have your spot yet, I encourage you to go get your spot reserved today. We would love to see you in Salt Lake this summer. All right, with that, let's wrap it up. So once again, thank you so much for being here for this 150th episode. So glad to have you with me all these weeks. So thanks so much for being here. Have a great week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.